Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. And if folks could, if you could mute your lines, we certainly do want to have you chatting with us and so on. But if you could leave it muted until you have something that you're going to contribute, that would be great.
Hi, I can't see.
And
Mike,
yeah, Pam.
I just want to make sure you could hear me.
Yep.
Because I'm temporarily, my grandson has his first lacrosse game. So I have you on my phone and in my hearing aids.
Okay.
And I'll put it on mute for you, hon.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So,
Bye.
Thanks. Okay. Cool. Thanks. One more thing. There we go. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for the Athletic Training School this evening.
Do you want pretzels versus fries?
I'm not sure who wants the pretzels and fries, but we're going to go ahead and mute everybody. So, and then you should be able to unmute yourself, and we'll be on the edge of our seats about whether the decision was pretzels or fries. So, so anyway, so thanks for joining us tonight for the Athletics Coaches Training Session. We have a nice mix of very new coaches for track and field. Some of them have experience with other sports, but new to track and field, at least as best as we can tell, and some very experienced coaches in track and field. So we're going to take a little bit of a slightly different approach. We're going to go over some things as a group. I just want to highlight a couple things in terms of the coach certification, so if everybody's on the same page. We'll do an overview of the sport in terms of just some general things, and then a quick COVID protocol review. Not going to go into anywhere near the depth. It'll take 3 minutes, if that much, because most of you have seen it. But I want to have that reminder, because then we are going to break out into two groups. The coaches who are relatively new to athletics are going to stay with me, and we're going to go through some rules and some planning sessions and so on down the line. And then the experienced coaches are going to go into a breakout room with Ryan. We have an exercise on mapping out a COVID training site using an actual site that I don't think any of you are who are joining us tonight are from. And then also have will be a mini version of what we call our Master Coaches session, which is some opportunity to share challenges and such that you're having, and talk with a group of very experienced coaches to come up with ideas and ways to solve them. So those two sections will be about 45 minutes each, going side by side. We're then going to come back and I do want to hear a debrief for so that the new coaches can hear what the experienced coaches talked about and some of the challenges there. That's a nice learning opportunity from that. And then we'll have the floor open for questions and such. So going ahead, and I'm thrilled with all the folks that we've got tonight. And hopefully I know several of you have already started in-person training. And some of you may not be able to do so this season, or may be able to do so starting later. Ryan, that answer would be a yes. So, sorry, something he sent to me. So, but let's go ahead. So, just so that you're familiar with this, this is the coach education progression. The gist of it has not changed if you've seen it before. You all are taking. Well, we have the general volunteer, which has all the different components here of the application, the protected behaviors. And now, this started about a month ago, everyone needs to have this communicable disease waiver. And that's going to be a permanent requirement across the board for everybody. Includes athletes need to have that too. And it's getting incorporated into the packets that go to athletes, into their athlete medical, actually, as well as the volunteer application. So it's new, and we'll go forward with that. The sport volunteer who helps out in your program, but is a little more active than just running a stopwatch or something. Not quite an assistant coach, but in that sort of mid-level there. They would then need to take the concussion course for that, which I think most of you may have. Then we have our assistant coach level, which is all the same stuff. plus coaching Special Olympics athletes or coaching unified sports. And I'm pretty sure we got several folks on here who have either taken coaching Special Olympics athletes in the last couple months or are taking it on Sunday of this weekend. We have the next session at that point. Then as a head coach, you need all of that same stuff, plus a sports specific course. What we're doing right now covers that sports specific course. And then we have an advanced coach level that allows folks to take athletes to higher, to competitions above the state level and such. And for that, that's all the above, plus a principles of coaching course. All of these individual items here are good for 3 years. Other than the orientation, it's year one and done on that. But the application, the volunteer application, the behavior, training, protected behaviors, the concussion, and so on, you need to renew each 3 years. That does not mean, to dispel a rumor, that does not mean that you need to take coaching Special Olympics athletes every 3 years. You do need to renew your certification by taking an additional coaching course or whatever. It could be coaching Special Olympics athletes, but you know, that course doesn't really change, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to take it again. So one of the things that we will do when we send out the follow-up from tonight's session is for each of you, we'll include a listing of your status. We may put them all together in a single report, but your status on each of those different things and when they're expiring and so on down the line. So you've got that handy. Okay. Any questions on the education progression? Nope. Okay, moving on. So track coaches. You should all, if you haven't already done so, get your hands on the two sets of rules that are key. There is the Special Olympics athletics rules. Most recent version is shown here. It's from 2020. And also the USATF competition rules. That's USA Track and Field. Most recent version is 2021. These are both available to download for free or to access for free. I know the USATF rules you can scroll through. I assume that there's an access now to download it as well. The links for both of them are on the coach resource page. Hopefully all of you have gone to that as well at some point, but if you haven't, the links are throughout here. It's a page that we've put together as the overall coach resource page, and then there's a page specifically for athletic coaches. So we've got those. In addition, throughout this this slide deck, and these were all, I think, included in the deck that went with the preseason, there are what we call some SOMD specific adaptations. In the very near future, let's say 2 weeks, just want to hedge my bet there, we'll have a compiled version of that rather, so it might be a 1-page or a 2-page just summary of all those adaptations. It was a suggestion that came out of a recent principles of coaching course that someone had, and I think it's a good one, just to make it a little more user-friendly than having to flip through a PowerPoint. So we'll go through and do that. But you should go and you should be familiar with those. Wanted to highlight, since several folks here maybe have not, even the experienced coaches have not gone through a coach training for specific to athletics for a while. So this summarizes the rule changes that have occurred recently, say in the last 4 or 5 years. As was mentioned at the preseason webinar, the pentathlon is now the 100, the 800 shot put, long jump, and high jump. So the 400 is no longer a part of the pentathlon, it's the 800 meter with that. I can guess as to the motivation behind that and why they did it, but I'm not 100% sure. So, but that's what that is there. The 800 meter race, this occurred a few years ago, is a 1-turn stagger. We'll talk, for those of you who are new coaches, we'll talk about what that kind of thing means. But as opposed to what had been called a waterfall start, where everybody starts on a curved line for the 800, which they still do, I think, in high school. In NFHS rules are still the waterfall start. We use what's called a 1-turn stagger, and then they can cut in at what's called the break line on the backstretch. For the 1500 meter races and longer, they're all using a waterfall start, which that's not really a rule change, but just to clarify with the 800 meter. when we can do relays, and the same thing goes when we can do the 800 and the 1500. But when we can do relays, the 400-meter race typically is what's called a 3-turn stagger. But if we have 4 or fewer teams, we recommend, or it's recommended, to do a 1-turn stagger instead. And again, we'll talk about the staggered starts for the new folks in a bit. The big change from 2 or 3 years ago is that for the 4x100 and the 4x200 relays, there is no longer a fly zone or an acceleration zone that they had. Instead, that fly zone has been incorporated into what's now a 30-meter exchange zone. So it doesn't apply to the 4x400 because there were only fly zones when a leg was 200 meters or shorter. So that there again, there's no fly zone, but they can still go back and start as far back as that. That's just all now part of the fly zone or acceleration zone. And then the protests can be, this is the only sport that I know of right now that can do this, but protests can be filed by an athlete or their head coach. That's specifically, USATF rules specifically allow an athlete to file a protest when they wish or when they feel that it's appropriate. And we've only had a handful. I will say one of Bob Stack's folks, Mr. Joe Wu, was the very first athlete to ever file a protest, and did a nice job with that. Wasn't upheld, but still did a nice job in following through with that. So, okay. And then actually, this should be more resources that are here. So 3 resources that I want to be sure that everyone here goes and looks at when we're done. One is our overall coach resource page and the links there, or you can just go to our homepage and this kind of walks you through how to get to it. Many of you, I'm sure, have been there. There's also a specific page assigned for athletics coaches. Within that, there's links right from the coach resource page to there. And that has several specific things. There's links to the rules that are there. There's several other things along those lines. That'll also be where when we can have competitions, competition information, and so on. And the third, which we actually will visit in a moment here, is the SOI Athletics Guide. Hopefully folks have had a chance to go to it and see it before, those of you who are experienced. It is a phenomenal guide. In fact, why don't we go ahead and click to it. Okay, everybody can hopefully, yep, there. Wow, see, my laptop is lagging quite a bit. So Special Olympics many years ago invested in a coaching guide for virtually every sport that was offered at that time. And you'll see a different version or a different type of guide for many other sports. They then, I think it was in 2017, updated several of those guides to this new format. What's nice about this new format is the way they've got it, it works really well on a phone or on a tablet or whatever. And so again, you've got the link there, but just kind of clicking through, it gives you the guide there, and then we've got the acknowledgements. But it gives you a section for a variety of things. So here it gives you the overall basic mechanics of running. It really breaks things down phenomenally well on things. It does, in essence, a task analysis. I do not expect you to read this as I'm scrolling, so I won't apologize for scrolling down. But lots of pictures. There are some embedded videos in here as well, like here. So
set, go. Good. That's mark, set, go. Okay, you can slow down.
Okay. Gives lots of training drills. Sometimes they'll have a video to go with it. Okay. That's a great drill. Obviously, we can't do that in phase 1 or phase 2 of the COVID situation, but it's something you can use later. But anyhow, it goes through, and again, you can imagine this would work really well on your phone because just the way they have it laid out now. But as a breakdown for sprinting, a breakdown for middle distance, I think there may be some long distance down the bottom on that. It gets into your field events for checking in. Again, gives you these key skills checklists for everything. And again, within each of these, there's lots of both photos and various videos and pointers and so on down the line. It's just again, it's a phenomenal resource. And if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, I strongly recommend that you do. One note, again, this was published in 2017, so going on 4 seasons ago. It does not have any rule changes since then. So for example, for the pentathlon, it still indicates a 400 meter, but again, they can't update it right away. I'm not sure. I know they invested a ton of money in this. So anyway, be sure that you go and actually spend a little time with that when you're done. We can only, in a 2-hour or so session, you can only cover so much. Okay. Any questions on any of that stuff at this point? Not, we'll go ahead. So very quickly, because I think most of you are familiar with this, but I want to just give a reminder, because this will also set a context for some of the conversation we're having. So just as a reminder, for while we're dealing with our COVID protocols, until things are somewhat back to normal, we're dealing with effectively a 3-phase approach. Right now, everyone is in phase 1, and that requires that your groups can be no more than 10 participants. That includes your athletes, your partners, your coaches, your volunteers, anybody who's in that immediate area. You have to maintain a strict 6-foot physical distancing or social distancing of 6 feet throughout. So no one can be closer than 6 feet to anyone else. And that can be a real challenge for many of our athletes. In phase 1, there is no direct contact and no indirect contact. Direct contact, again, being someone touches another person. Indirect contact, someone touches an object and then someone else touches that object and it hasn't been sanitized between. And then that 4th bullet is sort of redundant with that indirect contact thing. And then we also have the screening that needs to take place at your practices. When things get a little better, I think St. Mary's might be in a position where they could go to phase 2 at some point in the future. I'm not sure if it's still tracking that way. There are a few counties that are getting in that direction. It's much of the same applies, except you can go to groups of 50 people or fewer. Again, that includes everybody in the group. Still have the physical distancing of 6 feet and no direct contact, but you can have indirect contact. So it can be that someone could use a piece of equipment and then someone else can use that piece of equipment and you don't sanitize between. Certainly if you can sanitize, it's better, but it's not a requirement. And again, the screening can take place. In both of these situations, I've talked about a group of 10 participants or fewer, or a group of 50 participants or fewer. That is a group. When we're talking about a group, it's again, it's everybody who's in that immediate area is counted. And they need to stay together as a group, but you can have more than one group at a facility, provided they stay 50 feet apart and they don't intermingle. So let's say we're in phase 1 now, you have a group of 10 participants. You could have another group of 10 participants participating at the same time at a different location within the track area, provided, again, they don't intermingle, they aren't working separately, and then everybody who does the shot put goes from each group goes to the shot put, because then they've kind of cross-contaminated, if you will, between them. So they need to keep that separation throughout. So that can be a challenge in and of itself, but just want to make sure folks realize that that is an option there. And then again, same thing would go with the group with phase 2. It's just that the base group of 50 or more, or I'm sorry, up to 50 rather, is just bigger, but they would still need to, you could have more than one group present if you had the physical distance to make that happen. Now, this is just a summary of that same stuff, and you'll get this in your when you get the slides. Not going to read through this, just want to highlight that everybody now needs this communicable disease waiver. It's a one-pager, and work with your area director on getting it and distributing it out, and collecting it back up in that whole process that's there. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that'll be incorporated into the overall medical and volunteer packets going forward. And then in addition, we mentioned there about the screening. This is a screening log that you would, and actually this is an older version of it. There's a revised version. I forgot, I did not grab that slide. But anyway, that you need to check each person when they check in. This is required for every practice session, basically every practice session, any meeting you have, anything where people are getting physically in the same location. And again, it needs to be done each time and submitted up to headquarters for each practice within a week of that practice. And again, your area directors know all the protocols for how to deal with that and how to get them in. So that's the general stuff, just as a quick summary. Then we shared some key adaptations specifically related to track at the preseason webinar a few weeks ago. So, and these are all derived from the 6 foot social distancing requirement, the no direct contact, or the no indirect contact in phase 1, but the no direct contact in phase 1 and 2. So things such as if you're going to run races, you have an alternate lane left dark. It's not exactly 6 feet, but it's good enough for what we've got there, so that you could have potentially 3 or 4 runners, depending upon how many lanes are on your track within a given race. You can only do races where runners need to maintain their lanes throughout. So that's up to and including the 400-meter race for now. And the reason behind that, if you go to 800 or higher where they cut in, even with a staggered start, where they cut in, there's the really good likelihood of both contact, but also certainly wouldn't be maintaining the social distancing. So I'm not able to do that. Also, no relays during this time. It says, again, until we're in phase 3, realistically, we don't expect to be there this season or this track season, but hopefully we'll be there going forward. But no relays because of, again, the, well, in phase 1, there's the indirect contact issue, but in either of the phases, there's the social distancing and the potential for direct contact. And then the no community hydration devices. That's just none of the big orange water coolers or whatever. People bring their own water bottles. When we're in phase 1 only, which we all are at the moment, any implement that you have that you use needs to get disinfected between runners or users. So if we're talking starting blocks, the shot, mini jab, softball, so on down the line, need to be disinfected after each person's use. Or if you can do it, if you have a sufficient amount of equipment for a given practice session, you can assign an athlete a specific implement. You can assign an athlete a mini jab, or if you're doing the softball throw, a softball or a shot or whatever. And they use that throughout the duration. After they throw it or put it, if they're using the shot, they have to retrieve it, bring it back, so on down the line with that. Once you get to phase 2, that becomes a non-issue because you can have that indirect contact, but that is an option. We have already shared some, we have a stockpile of mini jabs and some other equipment. It's limited, but to the extent that we can share it for areas to use, with the understanding, of course, that we need to get it back. And then if there is a situation where we have an event, hopefully we'll be able to have some competitions that we may need to get it back and then give it back to that area for, just for a short period. So we offered that earlier, and we'll, and if there's anyone else, let us know, and we'll see about getting some out to you if we what we have there. And the mini jabs are the ones that are the most challenging, only because they're a little bit more expensive and for an area to stock up on them. I use as the example Baltimore County. I still coach with Baltimore County, and we've accumulated 20 or so, but that was over a period of several years. We buy 3 or 4 one year and 3 or 4 the next year. So, oh, and Jeff, okay, I'm sorry. I haven't been watching the chat there. Don's asking about the 800 in lanes. You can, if you are practicing the way that you described there, that's fine. We're not going to do any competition along those lines. It's just too much of a bastardization of the event itself. So, because yeah, that would essentially, you'd have to work out some type of a 4-turn stagger, which I don't know that that's marked there at all. So we can talk offline on that, but yeah. So any questions on these adaptations and such? Again, the purpose here is just to refresh everybody before we go into our next section. Okay, so great. So Ryan, if you have the breakout groups, we've got, and I want to see real quick if anybody new signed up. I don't think they did. Who hadn't signed up ahead of time.
No, I think we'll have 7 in each group, Mike.
Oh, great. Okay. So we're gonna do these breakouts for about 45 minutes each. Well, I mean, not 40 each, but for 45 minutes we'll be going simultaneously. So Ryan, if you want to push that or go with that, and cool. Okay. You guys should be headed there. Oh, Ryan, you set up the other one as a room. Actually, I wanted to keep the one group central.
Okay.
That way we can keep recording stuff. That's all.
Okay, so close all of them then?
Yeah, close all of them, and then we'll just.
Oh, it's not for another 30 seconds.
Okay.
It's my first time doing it. I'll figure it out.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had done these before.
No, I hadn't.
Okay.
Polls, I'm a pro. But
Okay.
they'll be back in 10 seconds.
Okay. And what we need to do is move people out of room 1.
Okay.
We were in the breakout session and we got kicked back out again.
Yeah. There was an error in how these were set up.
Okay, I think I got it, Mike. Give me 1 second.
Actually, you know what? I think you're gonna have to recreate these.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
And when you recreate them, just create the one group.
Yep.
Thank you for your patience.
All right, we should be good.
Okay, let's try it again. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know who. No, this isn't.
I'm sorry, Mike.
That's okay. I'll do it. I'll get it. That's fine.
Thank you.
Oh. said 45 minutes. Yep. Okay. This should have it. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Okay, I think we are good. Thank you there. Okay.
Mike, Steve O'Connor, I'm still in the main room.
And that's where you should be.
Oh, okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, everybody in the category that we call relatively new to athletics, or as
That's a, yeah. I may be, I've got my earbuds on, so I'm listening. So I've got my wife just had her second COVID shot. It's not feeling too well, and I got Matt. So I may be, I'm here, but not in front of the screen all the time.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so
Thanks.
let's go through these. This is the other group. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so wanted to go through different components in terms of the rules and so on. The resource of that coaching guide is really useful in terms of you mapping out and how do I train an athlete in this specific skill and such. It's really hard to do that remotely. If we were live, we would be going through that quite a bit. But I wanted to be sure that that you're familiar with all these different things. And actually, why don't we jump ahead to here? So this is what a typical track, if you'll excuse the fact there's no lanes there. But this is the general layout. So we've got one of the things with track and field is there is a consistent finish line. All the races always finish in the same location. Some of you are snowshoeing coaches, I think. There they have a consistent start line for the most part, but here we have a consistent finish. So the races that you're going to be doing for the most part, so with the 100 meter, the finish line is, sorry about that, is right here on the track. It's always in this corner, and there's usually a spur, if you will, on this end of the track here. Sometimes you'll have a track that has a spur on the other side as well. But you'll see here with a consistent finish line, if you're curious as to which one it is, another thing that you'll see coming off of this finish line on most tracks is a little curved line. Hold on, so let me see if we can. So we have, the other group is using some pictures of some actual tracks. So here we go. Here we go. Okay, so this is Annapolis High School. Maybe this is the best way to look at it as we're going through here. So one way, if you're ever confused on where is the finish line or what is the finish line, it almost invariably is going to look like this, where you've got a straight line and then a little curve coming off of it. The straight line, of course, is the finish. Oops, sorry, is the finish line. The curve is the waterfall start for any of the longer races that start here. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. Your 100 meter, so everything comes off of that or is finishes here. Your 100 meter start is 100 meters back. It is usually where at some point where the lanes coming in on the curve and the straightaway from behind it are overlapping. This can be one of the most confusing spots on a track. I'll tell you that right now. Just be aware of it. And then about 10 meters, or not about, exactly 10 meters behind that is another line, which is 110 meters. That's for the men's hurdles, which we do offer. Very few people do it, but that is an offering that we have in Special Olympics. For any of the races that are shorter, if you're doing a 50 or a 25 or whatever, those are almost never, unless you used the track the previous year and put down a permanent mark, that's not going to be on the track. So what you need to do is measure back from the finish line, whatever that distance is. So if you're doing a 50, measure back 50 meters from the finish line, and you'll draw a line. It's highly unlikely they're going to let you put anything permanent down. We frequently use sidewalk chalk, or if you're buying it on like Amazon or whatever, you can get a big thing of it. It's called railroad chalk, and it's that'll last you 3 years or more with that stuff. But you can just draw a line drawn back from the finish line. The 50 and the 25 are the two most common ones in here. If you have any athletes who utilize a wheelchair, you may also have a 30 meter, and they would do a slalom through there. So we've got the 100. The 200 starts around here on this side here, and the 200 uses what's called a one-turn stagger. And what that means, as you can imagine, if you remember your old high school geometry, the athlete or the runner in lane 1, if everybody lined up side by side, that runner is going to be running a shorter distance than the athlete who's running in lane 8. Again, just because they're further out if they lined up side by side. So to compensate for that, we use what's called a staggered start. So, and I got to be honest, looking at this, I'm not 100% sure which it is, but you can see in each lane there's a little marker that's there. And so the runner in lane 1 would line up at his own or her own starting line. The runner in lane 2 would have his or her own starting line, 3, 4, so on down the line. And that then adjusts the distance that they're going to run, so everybody's running a consistent distance. So when we're talking about a one-turn stagger, that means they're staying in their lanes around one turn. Now they're going to stay in their lanes on the straightaway also, but as opposed to a two-turn stagger. So when we get to the 400 meter, the 400 meter starts back here by where all the where the finish line is, and that is it's hard to see the marks on there. Those are marked again. They each have their own starting marker or starting line there within their lane. But that's adjusted so that when they run around 2 turns, everybody's running the same distance. So we're talking about a 2-turn stagger. Again, that's their running. It's adjusted for 2 turns. And then there's another, it's used, I think, only for the 4x400 meter relay called a 3-turn stagger. And for that, it's adjusted even further so that they're running the same distance when they run through 3 turns or curves, and then actually for them when they get to the last curve, they can break in. There's a thing called a break line. I'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, so when we're talking about staggers, it's all built in so that everybody is running the same distance. And when you get to your track, be sure that you look at it to see what's what. There's a slide in a moment. It was included in the preseason webinar as well, that gives you what are sort of standard track colors for their markings and such. You got to look at the track. This one was close to standard. I happened to go down, actually Ryan and I went down to meet with the folks from Anne Arundel County to help them kind of figure out some stuff for their track. And so I'm somewhat familiar with it. The markings are close to standard. But the thing is, look at them. In most cases, they'll mark in lane 1 or lane 2 what the start line is. So, for example, for the 2-turn stagger here, because that's used for the 400 meter race or around 2 turns, it'll say in either lane next to the line in either lane 1 or lane 2, it'll say 400 meter start. And the 3-turn stagger, it'll say 4x400 meter start. So be sure to check that out and make sure that you're using the right start with that. The other thing I'd mentioned was we said the 800 meter race is now run in what's called a 1-turn stagger. So the 800, your standard track is 400 meters around. Your 800 meter is twice around the track. But the athletes don't need to stay in their lanes the entire distance. They stay in their lanes for that 1-turn stagger. So they're going to, they'll line up. I think it's these ones that are relatively close together. They'll stay in their lane around the turn to what's called a break line. And that is, I believe, right here. The break line is where anybody can move into an inner lane and then run the rest of the race on the inner lane. The stagger is worked out so that if they cut in from here into lane 1, then they're continuing, and they continue to run the race in lane 1. They're running the same distance as anybody else in the race. That's one of the reasons why at this break line, when they cut in, that we really can't do the 800 during a COVID situation, because they do pile up there. I mean, the athlete moving into an inner lane needs to sort of give right away, if you will, to the other athletes there, but still they pile up. So those are some of the general starts. The other type of start, if you're lucky enough to have an athlete who runs, say 1500 meter or longer, it's called a waterfall start. Even if you don't have an athlete who does that distance, you should know what a waterfall start is. And that is where they're starting on this, you can see a curved line here. This is the waterfall for the 1500. There's another curved one here, which is the waterfall for the 3000 meter. And what that means is they line up on that waterfall, on that line. They don't have to be in a lane. They can be, you can line a dozen or more people up on this section here. But as soon as the race starts, they can cut into lane 1, provided they're not obstructing somebody else. And it's just called a waterfall because it's sort of a cascade. I don't know who thought it up, but I'm guessing at that. So for those longer races, the 1500, the 3000, so on, again, they can cut right in. And then I had mentioned before in high school rules, if anybody has a son or daughter in high school, or if you coach high school track, National Federation of High School Sports still has a waterfall start for the 800. That's why that line is still here, that they would cut in. Okay. Any questions on that in terms of what a stagger is? Nope. Okay. And then this explains what I just talked through that we have there. And yeah, notice there the 1500 and above can have more laces and reins, or more racers than lanes. These are those standard track markings. I think we blew past them before. In most cases, all your lane lines are solid white. All of your starts, at least on the straight, are a solid white, or at least partly solid white. When you get to like the 800 start, there's a mark in the middle and such. And then your waterfalls, all your finish lines, or the finish line there. When you're going to a one-turn stagger for the 800, the typical coloring is a green mark in the middle. Sometimes it's a solid green line. Sometimes they could do something completely different. That's there. Again, check it out. For your 3-turn staggers, it's a blue marker in the middle, and then, or it could be a solid blue line. Again, check it out. The 2-turn staggers, it varies, but take a look at it. If all else fails, the 2-turn stagger is the line that's between the 1-turn and the 3-turn that's there. I mentioned about the break line in the back of the track. That's usually a green dashed line that's almost straight across the track. There's a slight curve in it, but it's almost straight across the track. For your relay zones, the ones that most folks, when we can do relays, are going to be looking at are these yellow triangles that they mark the beginning and the end of the old exchange zones. Some tracks have been repainted so that they have the proper marking with the new 30-meter exchange zone. But in most cases, they have the old markings that are there. And what had been the fly zone, which is now the beginning of that longer exchange zone, is this little, a smaller triangle of the same color that's there. So we're talking about it as far as markings and so on down the line. So hopefully at some point in the future, when we're out of COVID protocols and such, you'll be able to do relays. I got to tell you, the relays are other than the high jump. High jump's my favorite event, but relays are some of the most exciting stuff. I hope that you do as you know, have as many of your athletes do relays as can. I know, again, I volunteer as a coach for Baltimore County, and we try to get virtually everybody into a relay. Even some of our slower racers, if they can handle a 100-meter distance, we try to have them in as a relay with some alternates factored in as well. But a 4x100-meter relay is, it's 4 runners, each are running 100 meters. So you've got your first runner is going to start here on the 4-turn or the 2-turn stagger that we talked before. Your second runner is going to be here, and you can sort of see the yellow exchange zone. I think this one they did repaint it because you got, oh no, they didn't. They got the little one back here. So this, if you can see this, looks like an arrow head. I don't know if I can zoom in even closer there, but in lane 1, the exchange zone here is from here. This was the end of the beginning of the old exchange zone, but now they can go all the way back to this fly zone. So you've got 30 meters in there, and that's the space within which the baton needs to be passed. We'll talk a little bit more about relays in a minute, but it's somewhere in between those 2 marks. The baton has to exchange hands cleanly and going forward. And then your second runners will run here, and then you see again we've got the arrows here, and then this again is the start of the new exchange zone with the new rules through this lane. So you got your runners here, and then your third exchange zone is here. You notice as you get further around the track, they kind of tighten up a little bit because there's less of a distance to run. As a pointer here, this is the most confusing spot on the track. I mentioned this when we were just talking about the start for the 100 back here. When you're setting up your relay teams, check out your athletes. I mean, not everybody. A lot of athletes, they want to be the one to finish the race, and that's great. If they can't handle keeping track of what lane they need to be in here, don't have them as your final runner because they're going to DQ your team. If they, the tendency in this turn here with the overlapping lines, and they are overlapping in a different way on almost every different track you can look at. The ones at Towson are different from the ones here, are different from the ones at McDonough, where I usually train. They're different from the ones down at Westminster High, so on down the line. But you select your athlete who is not going to DQ you there, and such, or DQ your team. In fact, I would say from a strategy standpoint, your athletes, the athlete on your team who, say, has the greatest challenge with lanes, you want them to be your second runner. And the reason being is, for the most part, their run is straight. They don't have to deal with a turn. Your first runner deals with a turn, your third runner deals with a turn, and your fourth runner deals with this god-awful exchange zone here. That that is what it is, but it is part of track. So kind of be strategic and move people around as well. That said, I also know that, and we've had this problem before, runner 1 and runner 2 are roommates and they have a fight that morning, and we can't have them exchange a baton later in the afternoon or whatever. So we rearrange the run order there. But yeah, kind of factor that stuff in when you're doing that. Okay. So we talk through that. So here, this is a really good, like I said, it's a good tool. I don't have this all memorized. I should also say I'm also a USATF track official as well. So I've been doing that for 20 some years, but I don't have this memorized. I usually keep a copy of this little cheat sheet that I put together myself. So it's helpful to have that. So I'm not going to go through all this here, but as a reference, the star that you see here is typically where the starter is going to start. And your athletes should be familiar with where they're going to find the starter. They're going to be, the starter needs to position him or herself far enough down, and they're usually on the inside of the track, but far enough down that they can see all the athletes and can see for a good, that no one does a false start, which is someone starts early or jumps the gun, starts before the jump. So they want to be close enough that they can see it, but also far enough down the track so that the athlete in lane 8 or lane 6, depending upon how many lanes are on your track, doesn't have to turn their head too much to see him or her. So so sometimes, and also, so we always start races with guns. We can, to a certain degree, at the starter's discretion, if there's an athlete who's having difficulty with the gun, the starter can go further down and just get a further distance from the athlete that's there. We're not going to not start a race with a gun for that. That's something that your athlete should get acclimatized to. Strongly recommend talking with your area, and if you don't have a starter's pistol, invest in a starter's pistol, invest in a pretty good one, and a bunch of shells, and practice your starts with guns with your starter's pistol as much as you can. If you're using a public track or whatever, they're used to having guns going off there. But I've had athletes, again, I've been coaching for a while. I've had athletes who were terrified at the beginning, and then we just work on getting them accustomed to it. And by 3 or 4 weeks, I won't say that they're thrilled, but they can handle it, and then they eventually get that it's not an issue there. The other one that if you're doing for the relays and such, where the starter is going to be can vary. It depends upon how many racers are in the race. It could be that they're I've actually like at Towson, if you're familiar with Towson, where we have our summer games. Not that everything is about Towson, but there's a little hill that's up here, and the starter sometimes has gone all the way up here because of the severity of the turn, and gone up, like 5 feet up on the hill so that they can see, the athletes, but the athletes can also see him or her. And what they'll then do is they'll have an assistant starter who's helping watch the lines. But the athletes should be looking for them, and they should be familiar with, and the starter will talk to each of them as well, but they should be familiar with roughly where the starter is going to be. Let's see. Okay. Again, we're going to start with a gun all the time. I mentioned all that stuff there. If you have an athlete who has a hearing impairment, they should be watching. Again, they should be able to see the starter. They should be looking for the smoke of the gun, and that gives them the signal for that. In non-COVID times, they could get what we call a tap start, and that is we would have another official, or you could have one of your coaches during training be immediately behind them and do a tap on the shoulder to indicate to them to get started. The other thing that we can do is have a flag start, which is, I don't know if you've been to a track meet, you'll see officials using what are called marshal flags. Sometimes they're just a red flag or a yellow flag. Sometimes they're a pole that has a white flag on one end and a red flag on the other end. And they'll bring that down at the same time. Find out what works for your athlete. And if you need that kind of an accommodation, just let folks know ahead of time. And they'll do that. We try to be as long as it's a consistent or a normal standard type of accommodation, we try to make sure that we can do that. Let's see. So races that are up to and including 400 meters use a 3-command start. The reason being is races up to 400 meters could have could be using starting blocks. You could have an athlete who's using starting blocks. So that's where you have on your marks, where the athletes kind of get settled in. Set And whether they're using blocks or not, and I should say very few of our athletes currently use starting blocks. I think St. Mary's County may be the only one that's had success getting any, and even that, it's a very small subset of their athletes. But regardless, it's standard within track that we use this 3-command start. So the set would be them settling into their blocks and being still. Even if they don't use blocks, they need to be still at that point. And then the gun fires and they start with the gun. With races that are longer than 400 meters, where there is never going to be a starting block, it's only a 2-command start, which is on your marks and then the gun fires. So your athlete should be, and a lot of this is just repetition with your athletes going through all that. Mention about that. So false start, again, is when an athlete starts before the rest. And that could just be a little bit of a jump even with that. When that happens, we call the race, we stop the race, and we'll restart it. And that athlete is flagged, if you will, as having had one false start for that race. If they have a second one, they're DQ'd for that. So, and so again, and that doesn't happen very often, but you should be training your athletes to do that. It's better to be just a millisecond behind starting than doing a false start. And then we can call a restart if the athlete stumbles or if there's some problem there. That doesn't happen all that much, and that has to happen within within 10 meters or so of the start line with that. So, but again, that doesn't happen all too often. One of the challenges that sometimes can come into play with, excuse me, with new athletes or new family members who are participating in track is a family member or someone wants to run with the athlete. That's not permitted. Now, in a training scenario, when the athlete's learning to do their runs and start their races, that's fine. I would not have a family member do it generally, but just because there's a certain dependency that comes on it. But when we're actually running races, the athlete needs to run the race by him or herself. It may well be that you have some athletes who are fine in training but aren't ready to go to a competition, and that's okay. They'll grow into it. I've had several athletes along those lines where they trained with us, particularly in general, they're younger athletes, but they train with us for a couple of years, and then eventually they do go to be able to do a competition. Just know and make sure and tell folks up front that that's a requirement that's there. The other thing to fall into this, and in terms of running with the athlete, is even if they're running off of the track, if they're running alongside the athlete, and in essence, and they're effectively pacing the athlete, that's going to be DQ as well. So it's not something you're training your athletes for, it's training your family members to break them of that. I have one of the folks I work with quite a bit, and is a phenomenal coach. I remember the first year he was there, his son was fairly young, and was in a relay, and he was on the back stretch of the track and started to run with them and almost got that whole team DQ'd. So we, it was my bad. I hadn't properly educated them on that, but be sure you do that for your folks. If you have an athlete who's visually impaired, there's some adaptations. You can use in that case, you can have a guide runner. And in this case, it says here must be in the same household. That's only because of with COVID, because they would be running literally right next to that runner down the track, and using it again. They're helping the athlete guide. They're not touching the athlete. They're not doing any of that, but they're running along the side and verbally giving them guidance to stay in the lane. In other situations, we can also use what's called a guide rope, which we can talk about at another point if anybody has that situation. For races that are run in lanes, they do need to run in their lane the entire distance, but if they leave their lane on the straight part of the track, it's not necessarily a DQ. So if we, sorry, here there's Westminster track. Let's go with that. Let's say they're in the 200-meter race here. They need to stay in their lane around the turn, and they should be staying in their lane the entire distance of the race. It only becomes a DQ if one of two things happen. Either, well, one of three things, let's say. One, which rarely happens, is the athlete steps off the track. If they literally step off the track on either side, either to the inside or the outside, they're DQ'd. It's an automatic DQ. Doesn't happen that often. The two most common problems with changing their lane is if they gain an advantage, and if they're running around the turn here and they cut into an inner lane, even if they go back, it's still counted as them gaining an advantage of running a shorter distance. But now, if when they come around there and they're on the straightaway, if they change their lane, it's a violation, but it's not a DQ because they haven't gained an advantage. Unless that third situation pops in, which is they impede another runner. They get in the way, somehow negatively affect the race that another runner is. So we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes in more detail. So anyway, so the key thing is going outside their lane, yes, is a violation, but it's only a DQ if they step off the track, gain an advantage, or impede another runner. So people often wonder that. Now you should constantly be training your athletes to stay in their lanes. And actually, one of the questions that hopefully they'll get to in the other group is, what are they doing to work with athletes to stay in their lane? I know from my experience, it's just a lot of repetition, working with them, having a coach run in front of them, running backwards down the track in front of them, pointing at the lines as part of a training, and so on down the line. Let's see, we've covered all this. I'm not going to go that. The finish, it's whatever, it's their torso that crosses the finish line that counts as a finish. With that, we don't need all that detail that's there. We talked through the staggers. So on, we did mention about passing the baton. That's what's important within that exchange zone. So it doesn't, what we talked about before, where it's now a 30-meter exchange zone. The baton itself needs to be within that exchange zone. Both runners do not have to be. So they, in theory, could exchange the baton right at the beginning of the exchange zone, where the incoming runner hasn't even gotten into the exchange zone, but they're handing the baton off. The baton and the outgoing runner are both in the exchange zone. If it's a clean pass, that's good. Same thing goes at the end of the exchange zone. The outgoing runner can be out of the zone as long as the baton and the incoming runner are both in the exchange zone, and that pass happens in the exchange zone. That said, again, we train a lot of athletes in the relays. We always focus, just because of the potential for something to get screwed up, focus on them exchanging it in close to the middle as possible. Trying to give them a visual marker on the track can be helpful. And in some ways, actually, the way that they've got now, where in most cases you have the little triangle marking the start of the exchange zone, and then 10 meters in, you've got the other triangle that's still there on the track, giving the runner, stand on that triangle as their marker, because you as a coach aren't going to be out there at their at the exchange zone helping them, and you cannot expect the officials that are in exchange zone to give athletes specific instructions there. What they're going to say is, go where your coach tells you to go, and get them lined up there. So if you can find a consistent visual marker that's going to be on the track, that's fine. Again, we can go through there. That just is the diagram on this. If this is the end of the, it's hard, this graphic sucks, I'm sorry. The end of the exchange zone here, the runner and the baton is outside of it, so that's a DQ. Here, the outgoing runner is just a little bit out of the exchange zone, which is fine. The key thing is the baton isn't. The baton's still in here, and that's fine. Okay, so here, sorry, I want to use this when we're talking about impedes. And I have to do this as a, I can't do this on the main screen. So let's say this is a race going through here. So the athlete in run, this is the one I can move around. So obviously if this athlete comes out here and touches or in any way blocks a runner, that's sort of an obvious impede and it's a DQ. Before anybody asks, there's no compensation, if you will, for the runner who got impeded. That's sports. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. But the runner here, he or she could be, a good distance in front of the athlete, in the lane that they've moved into. If their being in that lane affected that runner, then that's an impede. So it could be if so athletes running and 5 meters down the line, 10 meters down the line, whatever, if them being there caused this athlete to slow down, that's an impede. So now there's a judgment call that the officials would make, of course, if they're way down here and there's no way that would have reasonably had any effect on that athlete, it probably wouldn't get called. But the point being is, you're not training your athletes to impede. You want to train them to stay in their lanes, but it's knowing what could be an impede and what might not can be helpful for you as a coach. Okay. Let's see. Moving along, field events. Again, that guide is phenomenal. Key thing on the shot and the mini jab, make sure you're using the proper weights. The shot, if you've never done or your athletes have never done the shot, in COVID, I would not train a new athlete in this. The shot is it's not the only event that someone can really hurt themselves, but it is the one that has the highest likelihood. Effectively, again, if you've never done the shot before, they are pushing a cannonball. It literally is a cannonball of either 4 kilograms or 3 kilograms, potentially 2 in very limited situations, but they're pushing that out. There is a tendency to throw the shot because typically they've moved up from a softball throw or whatever. And the problem is if they try to throw the shot, they're going to potentially screw up their wrist and also screw up their shoulder potentially. It really should be, I don't know if you can see from here, they start with the shot right down here by their chin. It doesn't have to touch their chin, it has to be in that vicinity. And it's literally a push from that position, just pushing it straight out. There's other sorts of things and rules with that in terms of once they get into the set position and such. We don't have to go into that right now. Again, the guide gives you phenomenal stuff with that. But if the athlete can't do that, if you see them, you're working with them, and this happens again. The shot is one of the key events that I train within our program. It's myself and one other guy, the only ones who train them in shot. New folks coming in are regularly trying to throw it. And when I say a throw, it's their arms out, they're bringing the shot behind their head, and they're doing a flip like that. It really can screw up their shoulders. I would give athletes maybe 2 or 3 times trying that with you right there. And if they can't do it, they can do the mini jab, they can do something else, but the shot's not their event for that season. It's just too much of a risk of hurting them. And for that reason, because also when we're training the shot, we're right on top of them. And particularly the newer ones, we're literally touching and holding their hand to keep them from having it go out to their side and so on down the line from a safety standpoint. Just do not, in COVID times, until we're in phase 3, don't even try a new person doing shot. It's going to be an exercise in frustration. What you can see here, this is one of my old athletes, Annie. Or no, this isn't Amy. This is, I'm not sure who that is. But anyhow, you can see she's doing a push out there. So what other stuff's here? So the mini jav is a great event. I was skeptical, I will openly admit, when it was first introduced 10 or 15 years ago. But it's a plastic rubber tipped practice javelin, quite frankly. Special Olympics is not the only ones who do a mini jav. The USATF has that as an event for younger athletes as well. But they need to, there's a little grip on it that they hold, and they have to do an over the arm throw with that. It's one of those things where it's repetition is what's key for the athlete, doing it again and again. And again, there's some pointers that are in the guide that'll help you. But one of the things that I found is that there is a point after they do it enough times that it just clicks and they start doing it right and they start getting some distance. The mini jab, just as with the softball throw and such, there's a runway where they can run up to it. I would not start with training them using a stationary throw or of the jab, just standing still at the front line of the box, stand there and get that part down, and then you can start getting a couple runs up for that. Same thing goes with the shot put, start off doing a standing shot. When you can train new athletes in the shot put, I should say. Start off doing a standing shot in the position right at the front of the toe board itself, excuse me, and then start working in some spins or some twists or some stutter steps leading up to the toe board and such. But get the basic shot form down first. In fact, actually, even just get them the basic standing shot before you even deal with shifting your weight from your back foot towards your front foot. Get the form down initially, and then progress on. Let's see, other stuff. I want to hold off on the long jump. There's a better slide for these. So okay, so here, so these were initially developed. I put them together for training people to be officials at events, but they're really helpful for coaches as well, because it gives you sort of the breakdown. And we only have them for the shot, the mini jab, and the long jump, but I think they're helpful. I'm not going to read these through to you. You'll get them in the packet, but it does kind of walk through, about them starting in a stationary position. Now, that could be at the back of the circle, but they have to put it in their position with close proximity, and then it kind of designates what that all means going through there. And then some of the stuff at the end is more for the officials on this is how you measure it and so on down the line. But it does give you a really nice designation. And then here, this is what I wanted to get to with don't worry about the measurers and such. But you've got your circle. There are vector lines for both the mini jab and the shot put. And they need to fall between the vector lines and such there. So, but again, that can be really helpful with the mini jab. Similarly, it talks through this. The one thing I didn't mention before with the throw on the mini jab, it has to land tip first. That rubberized tip needs to land first. Now, it doesn't specify beyond that. So in theory, it doesn't have to be a beautiful throw to be legal. You want your athletes to get a nice, straight, smooth throw. If it's flipping end over end and it lands tip first, that's still a legal throw. It's not pretty. It's not something you're going to train for. You want to break them of that, but you can definitely, that would definitely count. But yeah, looking at it, and it's where that tip lands, just as with the shot, it's where the shot itself first lands. It'll make an indentation in the gravel. It's typically out in the sector lines, but you measure to the closest edge to that, to the throwing line, and the same thing with the mini jab, and that goes through more of the detail that you've got there. And we're going to run out of time in a second. So there's a diagram, but that gives you the dimensions of all you've got there. For the long jump, key thing with that is for our running long jump, the toe board, the front of the toe board needs to be 1 meter back from the jumping pit. It is, there is virtually no track that has that pre-marked unless you've done it from a previous year. But so you need to measure that back. And again, it's you start at the front of the pit, measure back, and draw your 1 meter line, and then make a toe board or a jumping board at least 8 inches wide across the track. Chalk works great for that. Don't use duct tape, as was noted there. We learned that the hard way. That can get slippery, actually. Adhesive tape works fine, but chalk actually works the best there. And because that toe board has to be 1 meter back from the edge, if the athlete can't jump a meter properly in a long jump, they can't be in the long jump. It's something for them to work towards. We have, I'd say that with the transition from softball throw to mini jab, again, I would say either mini jab or shot, maybe 5% of our athletes do do softball throw still. Most have moved on. Compared to the transition from a standing long jump to a running long jump is much more challenging. I'd say close to 30 or 40% of our athletes still do the standing long jump with that, and that's okay. That's what works for them. But anyhow, this works through and talks through talks through your fouls and so on down the line, and then a diagram. I'm not going to go through all that. There again, you've got the resources and such. So that said, it looks like we've got Ryan. We've got your group back with us.
We should all be back. Yep.
Okay. How did that go?
Good. We had some good discussion.
Oh, good. And Kathy, did you see a familiar sight? Yeah. So, yeah, figured we'd throw one in there. So what we'd like to do is have, since this is some of our more experienced coaches had the conversation, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to facilitate with that group, them just kind of sharing some of the things that they talk through in dealing with their more challenging or the challenges that they face, and including kind of figuring out the layout and how to work for COVID. So Ryan, I'll leave it to you.
Yep. So Mike, you're talking about the mini master coaches session questions we just talked about.
That, but also would love to hear how the conversations or the gist of what you talked about in terms of working out the layout on the diagram at either Annapolis High School or Westminster High, whichever one you use.
Sure. Can I share my screen here real quick?
I would be thrilled to have you share your screen. Just a minute. Okay. Let me get all the other stuff off of my screen so I can see it. Oh, that looks cool.
It's my artwork. We went with all circles because it was the easiest. So our group, we spent a lot more time on the discussion portion on the next slide that we covered, but we're running this for a little bit. We have the check-in being up top solely for the purpose of if anybody fails the screening, it's kind of easy for them to continue to exit the facility, while also keeping it away from the spectators that may already be in the stands there. So if it was down there, it's kind of within the range of where some people without symptoms may be. So we just preferred to keep it up there, simple. And according to this picture, it works. So that's kind of what we went with. Of course, if you're down here and it's really uneven or something, you can't set up a table, whatever. But that's what we came up with. So if we have 40 people in total, 2 coaches in each section, and then 8 athletes in each, we're using the 4 corners here as warm-up areas. So everybody's socially distanced.
So, and that would be a good 50 feet apart too, so you could have those in phase 1. Yeah.
Right, yes. And then for the flow of shifting stations, we just kept it with the direction of the track. It was kind of hard to break down, say we have an athlete just doing this event and then going to this. We didn't go into all that. We said it would kind of just rotate in the same direction as the track. But I was wondering if your group, Mike, had any other ideas.
So we weren't doing, we were doing something totally separate. So,
oh, yep.
Yep.
All right, well, that was our idea, to have them rotate in the direction of the track there.
Okay. Did anybody find the shot circle?
No, they did not.
Okay. We were there physically and we couldn't find the shot circle. So.
Nope.
But we did talk about it and where ours were, which are also not on the track area. So
Kathy, can you just share what you guys do?
Actually, why don't you go to the next slide because that has the track on it. Yeah.
That one? That one, Mike?
yeah,
Yeah.
this is a Westminster track. And I've actually run on the Annapolis one, Mike, so I did recognize that one too.
Oh, okay.
So you can see the shot put circle way up on the upper left. Actually,
Oh,
you see it way up there?
like right under the text box. Yeah.
Right. So, so we followed similar to what we just talked about in terms of flow, or that's what we will be doing on Saturday because we're moving outside this weekend. And our check-in will be, if you look over to the right, you see the parking lot. Our check-in will be just outside the gate. We will check everyone, including parents who wish to stay. But if the parents wish to stay, they will go up into the stands. There is actually a fence around the track. Only the athletes and coaches will be allowed inside that fence.
That's great.
So yeah, we're really lucky. We also talked about when we were trying to find the shot put circle on the other one. The question was asked, you know, if there isn't a shot put around, what do you do? We have been known to use the second long jump pit. You can see it over on the far right. We use the one on the left for actual long jump and the one on the far right for shot put. We're probably not going to start with shot put this weekend. I want to give a try this weekend, see how things go, see how the flow goes, because that's not 50 feet apart. So I'm not sure what we're going to do.
Yeah, and the pits are on the same end, so it's not like on Annapolis where the pits were on opposite ends.
Exactly, exactly, where you could alternate.
Right.
Yeah, see on this one, you could do long jump on the one side and shot put on the other.
Yeah.
And we also talked about, we do shot put into the sand only for initial skills and exercise, right? When you actually go to trying to do the glide and the turn and the pop, you got to be in the shot put circle to practice that. So we only use the sand pit for the initial couple of practices. So if we're not in phase 2, it's going to be a bit hard.
Right, right. Cool.
And just for the programs that haven't started yet, Kathy went with the approach of having a parents meeting, which was also open to any athletes before their season started, I believe it was. And she still has some parents that don't understand exactly what was discussed in those meetings. So even with a lot of reinforcement there, clarification for parents still may be needed. Just be aware of that.
Mike, what he's referring to is I had one parent who didn't understand that the count included aids. There was a new aid for an athlete this was her first day with the athlete and was accountable for the athlete for that day. And she was scared to death to not have him within her eyesight. Ended up letting her stay on the steps. Do you remember, Mike, for our indoor practice? So she wasn't up in the gym, but she stayed down on the steps. But no matter how many times you reiterate what the rules are.
Cool. That's great. Okay. And then Ryan, or the group, the other stuff that you talked about? Or well, first, actually, anybody from my group, and again, their focus here was to kind of map out the how they can operate within the COVID protocols. Do you have any questions or any thoughts? Like why did you figure this or whatever? No. Okay. Okay, right. What's the next part that we had? So, okay.
So yeah, for these questions down here, we'll run through these and kind of talk about what we discussed. So how do you train your athletes proper pacing in the longer distance races? Bob Sack was talking about breaking it down, I believe, into multiple 400s and getting them used to doing that.
So, and actually in here, if you have anybody who made some really cogent points, if you can let them.
I'd rather have Bob explain it anyway. Bob, if you could unmute yourself and then explain to the rest of the group.
You're still muted, Bob. So maybe we do need Ryan to explain it.
Nobody wants that.
Hold on a sec.
I'll see if I hit the ask to unmute. You're all set.
There we go. Yep.
Okay. Well, I had the advantage of having coached high school track for 32 years. So we did an awful, and I was always the distance coach, and we did an awful lot of coaching about pacing. All right. And okay, you can do that with elite athletes in high school and so forth. That's very nice. But you can certainly do it with Special Olympics athletes too. You just have to kind of be more patient, break it down. As I said, as Ryan mentioned, break it down to something like a 400. If you're training the person to run a 1500 or a 3000, and you know what their pace should be, or you can figure what their pace should be for a 400, you just have them, do that multiple times in a practice. To be fair, to be honest, you probably shouldn't do it more than about 5 times. If you do it too many times, you're going to get them exhausted, and that's going to be counterproductive. But you do it 4 or 5 times in a practice, something like that. You're trying to get them to run, let's say 90 seconds, because that should be their pace. Okay. They will learn. It'll take more than one day. It'll take more than 5 days, but they'll learn the pace. They really, really will. And it works.
And I would assume in that case, you're also, as they're, excuse me, passing you, they're giving them feedback on pick it up or slow it down or whatever, to give them feedback on their pace. Or are they keeping track of their pace themselves?
Well, I'm communicating with them all the time. I did mention that one year at state games, when I had a young lady who had wound up in the hospital because she was running a 1500, and she sprinted the first 200 and then kind of collapsed. I did mention it was not you who got after me, but one of the higher ups from Special Olympics came right over and told me, no, you can't do that. You're coaching them. You're not supposed to do that. And I was just trying to keep the girl out of the hospital again,
Sure.
So.
Okay.
And Kathy had a great idea of how to kind of combat that. Kathy, do you want to share? And I don't think it's against the rules. I don't see why it would be. Go ahead and share.
Well, we can talk about coaching after we go through this stuff, and track is a little unique in coaching. But go ahead, Kathy.
You want me to answer that now?
Yeah.
Or wait?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm
your
sorry.
idea.
No, I'm saying I'll make a couple points later when we
Oh,
get in terms of
okay.
coaching.
No, I was just saying, and I don't know if it'll
Yeah.
work, but if we were to introduce the athlete to the others in her heat, his or her heat, and try to make a connection there, and then tell her that for the first half a lap or until they hit the coach on the back straightaway, to run with that athlete, stay in your lane, but run with that athlete, just to get, it's a pacing thing. I mean, I don't think it's wrong, Mike, because when I was running, I was paying attention to the athletes around me and where they were in the race. And if I thought somebody was going out too fast, I'd let them go. But I also use their pace to help me figure out, where I wanted to be. So the idea was that they should just try to get her to feel the first bit of the race at a slower pace. Hopefully, after she gets to understanding what her pace is, then you can say, run your race, right? Run the pace that we practiced in practices. But just to try to break the habit of going out fast, perhaps saying, hey, Jane's in your heat. When you go out, I want you to run, right about where Jane is. Maybe you run, shoulder to shoulder or right behind her shoulder. Stay in your lane. And once you get to the far side, the back side of the track, then run your race.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a race, it wouldn't be pacing so much because that athlete wasn't entered specifically as a pacer. They're taking off of another competitor. I guess my cringing is more a matter of the risk of, until you get to know the abilities of that other athlete, you could be at a little bit of a risk there. But we'll talk a little more about coaching after we're all done this. But cool. Okay.
And then for the long jump, talking about our approach here, Don, can you say the pieces that you kind of break it down for your athletes?
Yeah, I'll kind of paraphrase, but basically, if we're trying to teach an athlete the long jump is new, or who's someone's having trouble with it, I try breaking down and maybe instead of like a full like running long jump, like 9-step, I try to do it maybe in a 3-step where they're getting used to jumping off one foot, landing, getting your knee up, but so trying just to get them familiar with that, and then they can go to the the longer step, whether it's 7, 9, depending on the athlete.
Mhm.
And then one of the questions was also was with maybe restrictions if you don't have a pit or something because of you might not get a track for COVID. There's some things you can do to help a running long jump. You can do skip jumps, either standing skip jumps or running and skip jump, where you're really getting the same kind of technique if you don't really have a pit. So
For folks who are relatively new and may not know what you mean by a skip jump, can you give a, if we were in person, you could demonstrate. Well, you
yeah, it's just basically it's basically off one foot. You alternate either left or right foot and you jump up and then bring your opposite knee as high as you can in the air. And then typically you kind of almost want to bring your hands kind of up like you're clapping, and then you can kind of like you would like a long jump. If you do it right, you can really demonstrate the kind of the takeoff of a long jump.
Right, and you don't have the risk or the challenge of not having without a pit. You don't want them landing on a long jump there. But yeah, it gets a good motion. That's great.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the rule. One of the things that especially it brings up in the track training is if you don't have a pit, long jump is one of the ones where you need the extra equipment. So
yeah, cool.
And Kathy breaks it down into 3 different steps with the run, the jump, and then the walk. So they always do those 3 pieces. They had some problems with after the jump, athletes would walk back the wrong direction or not exit through the back. So that's the 3 steps that she enforces there. And then she uses the I will jump through the sky for each step, kind of to keep that phrase in their head. So that's obviously not the full run and then jump, but it's for when you're breaking it down, I think, Kathy.
Some of our athletes have trouble with the 1, 2, 3, 4 counting steps initially. Eventually we get to just a measured and we don't count. But to start out with, we use a phrase, and they love it. They yell it out as they're running down the long jump. And we also use it for the softball throw. So step, glide, step. I love to throw, and the love to is like a little skip.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
Moving on here to the exchange for relays. Bob Stack had a great point. If you want to expand on your idea, Bob, with the visuals.
Well, I learned the hard way. Starting in 1997, I learned the hard way that we were going to need to use a visual exchange in all of the relays. And for those of you who are brand new, that means that say something like the 4x4 relay, the person who's run that first lap, when he's finished that 400, he or she is exhausted. And so you have the person that they're handing off to looking at them coming in and starting to move a little bit and extending a hand out, as opposed to trying, well, you wouldn't do it in the 4x4 anyway. You wouldn't even do that. You wouldn't do that if you were in the World Olympics games. But in the 4x1, we'll still use a visual exchange.
Yeah.
Other things are the fancy exchanges that I tried to use in 1997 and 1998 and stuff like that did not work. Did not. Or you needed a very elite athlete to be doing that. Mike, do you remember Tony Gorsica?
Yep.
Okay. I started with a couple of athletes on his level, and yes, we could do something fancy, but you can't always do that.
Yeah.
And it's not fair.
Yeah, I mean, I have tried, and every so often I'll try it if I've got a couple really elite athletes, but doing a blind exchange where the outgoing runner, for those of you who don't know what a blind exchange is, the outgoing runner is looking forward, got their hand behind them, ready to receive. Typically, it could be palm up or palm down, but they're receiving the baton that way. Had never had success getting that. It's the mechanics for both the incoming and outgoing runner, it's just too much. Or I'm not a good enough coach. That's quite possible too. But,
No, I had the exact same experience.
so thank you. You make me feel much better.
At the USA games in 2018, there were a couple of relay teams that did blind exchanges. They actually had couple of states had some fairly decent athletes. And they were able to do it, but you could tell that they had practiced it a lot. So.
Yeah. You had to practice it a lot in high school, a tremendous amount.
And the final piece we covered was helping athletes when they're starting the race, or how to keep them in the same lanes. We talked about focusing on the fly zone areas, kind of looking past the finish line, not down exactly where you're going. I think every night I usually have a bowl of cereal, go downstairs, it's dark out, I mean, not dark out, dark in the house, walking up steps. If you're looking down at the cereal, you're probably going to spill it. If you keep your head up and you don't spill it, it's kind of like a science thing. I don't know if that relates to track. That's kind of what I think of. That would keep me balanced and moving forward.
Yeah.
Might work. I don't know.
I'm just learning too much about you as a person, Ryan. So
that's all right. I'm an open person. And then Bob was talking about always having the same finish line. Sometimes for athletes that have trouble understanding the concept of this is where I finish, even if you have to move them back for a longer distance, always having that same finish line there. And Bob said he always wears a red shirt, so it's hard to miss him. So I think we had some good discussion in that group.
a question with that, because the last little sub question there is, I'll be honest, that's something I have a challenge with many of my athletes, is slowing down when they get to the finish line when actually they should be running their absolute fastest across that. Does anybody have any secrets or pointers that they've used other than yelling at them to keep running? But
no, I wish I did.
yeah.
Actually, somebody did, because I said I was going to adopt that idea, give it a try. I don't remember who it was. Looking on the track, past the finish line is markings for the starting line for some of the other races, the staggered start. So the question was, walking the athlete down to see that and say, okay, when you run your race, I want you to run the extra 5 or 6 steps from the finish line to this line.
Mm-hmm.
I think Don mentioned it.
Yeah,
I think it was Don who mentioned it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a try because I have similar problems with a couple of athletes.
And typically you can find something too. It might not even be a line on a track, but something like some landmark that you could tell them to, hey, run through that. And then that way they will, because a lot of the athletes will run to where you tell them to. So if you can, if it's like a tree or something, or something like, but I think in most cases you can find some sort of visual where they look, because a lot of times if they see where the kind of a whole bunch of people are gathered and they kind of know where the people are timing, they kind of run to that. But if you can tell them to, run further, they're gonna go further.
And I don't know if it lines up, but a lot of the tracks have lights too. I think Good Counsel's lights kind of would have been perfect distance to say to run past or something like that. But yeah, landmark. It's a great idea, Don.
Okay. So did any of the folks in your group have their own challenges that they brought up, or were you guys only able to get to focusing on?
We didn't talk about challenges too much.
Okay. So, but it sounds like these hit on several challenges that folks are having. Before I open it up to anybody else's any other questions, what I did want to point out, so I mentioned before about coaching, and so that people know what we're talking about when we're saying coaching. Yes, there's coaching in general. You're doing that all season. We were talking specifically about coaching at a competition, and most sports have some rule about coaching at the event and what you can and you can't do. Obviously, for a team sport, coaching is much more liberal, but for others, whether it's bocce or whatever, there are certain things you can coach at this point and so on down the line. The USATF rule on coaching for track and field is You cannot, before anybody thinks about it, you can't use any kind of sound amplification device. So no megaphones, no portable PA systems. Those are absolutely verboten. But the rule is you cannot be coaching your athletes, giving them advice, giving them any kind of verbal assistance while you are in the competition area. That's not the exact wording, but that's pretty darn close to it. The competition area is, in most cases, is determined by either the outer perimeter of the track or, as in Westminster High School, the fence around the track. So if you are outside of that space, it's not anything goes. You want to be, you want your athletes to be independent. You want them to be whatever, but shouting advice, shouting a time, whatever, from outside of the competition zone or competition area is not considered coaching according to USA track and field rules. Now, again, we want to honor sportsmanship. We want to do that, so on down the line. But and you can't be pacing your athletes. That's beyond coaching. You can't have someone running along the stretch of the track with the athletes, even if they're not on the track. That would be considered illegal, or a violation. But you do have that option to do that. And again, the show, when they're in competition, it's about the athlete. It's not about you as a coach. But if there's a way that you can do that and give them the pointers that you have, and also I should say, you can talk to them up and through the staging area as well. So again, everything is not about Towson. I don't want, but it serves as an example because many areas use the same model when they're holding competitions. So when you're at summer games at Towson, under a normal year, hopefully will be something close to that this time. Your areas are given, each delegation is given one or two what we call staging passes that allow someone to go into the staging area for the track events or the staging area for the field events, and can be there to warm up your athletes and can talk to them there. Once they leave the staging area, you need to be outside of the competition area, and from there you can say whatever. Keep in mind though, know your athletes. Sometimes you saying something to them from a distance can be worse than not saying anything. I have several athletes that, if we're setting up for a relay and you shout something to them, you're going to cause them to blow that exchange because it's distracted them. Their mind otherwise would have been focused on the race. So know your athletes there. But coaching that's quite simply the definition of coaching within USA Track and Field. So so that's that. Did want to open up then, Ryan, is this the mini deck or is this the larger deck?
This is the larger deck.
If you just go to the question slide, I wanted to open up. We had originally slotted this to for potentially going to 9 o'clock. I am not saying we're going to 9 o'clock. So, but I did want to open up for any additional questions that anybody might have, or for that matter, we have a kind of a rare situation here where we have a lot of really experienced coaches and a number of folks who are going to be brand new to track, at least as best I can, to coaching track, at least as best I can tell from GMS. Anything that a new coach might want to know from an existing coach, or where are your concerns as you're getting your program started? It could also be around COVID as far as that goes too, or the protocols.
Mike, Steve O'Connor, as the COVID with vaccinations being more available, is that going to impact any of the COVID protocols?
No, at this point in time, and we've gotten very specific information that we are not and we cannot have vaccinations, or even asking whether someone's had a vaccination or not. but no, the protocols are still going to be the same throughout. The one good thing with the vaccinations is that goes up, in theory at least. The incidence should start going down, and we are more likely to shift into a phase 2 or a phase 3. I'm not holding out hope on phase 3 for I don't know. That might be August or September in a best case scenario. But But yeah, no, vaccinations, they're a good thing. We are very pro-vaccination for this. And it's funny, we were doing, just as a slight aside, we had a pilot program going for our what's called CompFit, or fitness, competitive fitness, that's done entirely virtually. We had the championship this was a group of 10 athletes for Baltimore County in last Tuesday, not this most immediate one. But throughout the season, each athlete would be coming in. I've got my COVID shot coming, my vaccination coming up, and whatever. I got my second coming up, and it was all kind of, I wouldn't say it was a competition to who's getting it first, but there's a lot of focus there for that, and for our athletes. And luckily, they're in a little bit higher priority group too. But yeah, short answer is no. There's no impact on the protocol. Okay, other questions?
Mike,
Wow.
whoa.
Are you on this
Hold on a
planet,
minute.
ma'am?
You know me, I am just a mess when it comes to computers. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I couldn't ask any questions because you would have heard all the background noise at the game I was at. So I'm finally home. Thank you. No, I'm crazy. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Anyone else with any questions? Okay. Then if not, we don't need to prolong this any longer. Thank you for joining us. We'll send out, again, you'll get the deck. We'll include in the email with it those 3 resources. If you haven't gone to them, absolutely go to them, including particularly the SO coaching or coaching guide for track and field or for athletics. It is just a phenomenal resource. And like I say, you can have it on your phone. Heck, you can be out there. If you have an athlete who has a particular issue, look it up on the phone. Hey, Jess, how are you? That could be a really good resource with that. But also check out the other stuff, and we will include the status of any kind of certifications that you may need for things. So that said, I hope this was helpful. I know for the newer coaches, this may be a lot of information to absorb. We're always here and can help in any way that we can. Hopefully, I know we've got a few of the programs here who are either have started live or are going live soon, and that's great. I know others, there's facility challenges and so on, but hopefully we'll have everybody doing something in the near future. So thanks much. And I'll hang on for a couple minutes in case anybody had a question that they didn't feel comfortable asking, or just hits them as we're going out. But everybody else, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you during the season.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, everyone.
Of course.
This is Ryan.
Thanks,
to Ryan.
Mike. Thanks, Brian.
You're
Thank
welcome,
you
guys.
to my thanks, Mr. Ryan.
You're quite welcome, Jess.
Yeah, you can't beat that.
Bye.
Mr. Shack, it was good to see you.
Call me Bob.
All right.
Wait, so how do you two know each other? Bob, the question at the beginning where I said, Ryan, the answer to your question is yes, was he private chatted me of, did Bob teach at Good Counsel? It's like,
Yeah, well, Ryan went to Good Counsel,
oh, okay.
and I taught him. I taught him one summer.
Oh,
The summer math class.
And
Whoa.
Ryan, do you remember who was my co-teacher, my cooperating teacher? Who was the other person in the room? Your favorite teacher. Your favorite teacher.
Mr. Arnold? I doubt it was.
Yeah, it was Mr. Arnold. Yeah,
Was it him?
it was him. Yeah.
Oh my God. How's he doing?
He's fine. He's fine. I finally retired after 48 years of teaching and 2 years in the Navy. He's still teaching. We both coached track for a long time. He was, when you were there, he was probably still coaching cross country, but he'd given up track.
He was one special guy. I mean, he ran the place. He kept everybody in check. There was a few Saturdays because I was a big gum chewer. So Saturday I was in the lunchroom a lot.
But okay. Well, I was one of your monitors there.
I know you were. That might be where I recognized you more than
Teaching.
For those of you who didn't understand, we used to have detention at Good Counsel Saturday morning from 8 to 11.
Mhm.
And you could get
Whoa.
yourself in there if you were late to class, or if you were chewing gum,
Yeah.
or they had to wear, all the kids had to wear uniforms. So if your shirt was out or something stupid like that, you had detention.
Yep.
And it sounds like that's one of the places I would have met Ryan. So
You're not wrong.
Right.
Hey,
The
thanks a lot.
Breakfast Club, the movie The Breakfast Club has a lot of meaning to you, Ryan.
Pretty similar. Yes.
Anyway, thank you. This was real good. It really was.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, how'd the game go?
It was good. It was good. They didn't, well, it was their first game. Actually, he's actually playing like travel lacrosse. And he
How
has
old is he?
game 8.
Oh my God.
I know. Well, they have games. His home games are on Sunday,
Uh-huh.
and his away games are on Saturday, which is not good for me because I have my older ladies softball,
Uh-huh.
and we have like a league in Vienna, and I'm trying to get better, so I signed up to go practice. And well, we actually have games on Saturday. So
Okay.
anyway, I decided to go ahead and take this class.
Mm-hmm.
Just in case something comes up. So I'm certified. I don't think we're gonna do it. In fact, I know we're not gonna do it. But still, the more I know, the better it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like to keep learning, and
Yeah, no, and then
who knows?
that gives you flexibility there. Actually,
Yes.
we're kind of having old home chat and so on down the line. Caitlin, I see you're still signed in. Did you have a question? I mean, I'm not trying to push you out, but didn't know if you had a question. Or maybe she just stepped away from her computer. Okay.
Does she have her video on?
No, she has her camera off. So
Oh yeah.
had her on. She was in the group I had. She had her on for most of that. So. Okay. Oh well. Okay. Well, good to see everybody.
Yes.
So, thank you much.
We'll be seeing you.
Ryan,
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay.
Thank you for joining, Pam.
Bye, guys.
I'm glad you
Bye,
reached out
guys.
earlier about it. Always
Oh,
do that
yeah.
if you got questions. I'm here to help you.
Oh, well, I have lots of questions, hon, but I'll talk to you later.
You and me both.
Okay.
Bye, Pam.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Hey, Don.
Hey, I don't have anything else. I'm just slow exiting.
Oh, okay. That's fine. So, are you at work still?
Yeah. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, it's no problem. But
Okay.
no problem. But yeah, it was good. It was a good training.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Glad.
Yeah. It sounds like the group you had, well, by design, was very, very interactive. It was not very interactive on my end, which I think they got a lot of information, but it just wasn't as interactive as I would have liked. But it's okay. What a one that, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Why do you think that they made that change to the pen to add the 800?
I don't know. Other than I have not checked whether, I don't know if USATF has a pent or not. They have a heptathlon and certainly a decathlon. Maybe they have a pent, and maybe that's what the change drove.
There's a pen for an indoor track. They have that. But that's all different events anyways, because they do 60-meter sprints, 200,
Right.
like,
It's all
it's all funky indoor stuff. But because it's hard to get people to run the pen as is. I think a longer race just may make it harder.
Oh, I gotta tell you, the 400 Now, granted, we don't have a good, sorry, a good training regimen for getting athletes up to the 400, but that's the one that's killed all of our folks who had previously done the pent. Is, I mean, they love the high jump. They love the, I mean, there's only a certain number that can do the high jump, but that's the nature of the sport. But all the other events are great. It's the 400 that killed, and so there's no way. I don't even I think Eric Hines, you know Eric, I think, is the only one
Yeah.
who's, at this point at least, is doing an 800, and he runs the risk of DQing. He has a lot of trouble staying in his lane,
Oh,
even
really? I mean,
even around the one turn. So
I would think Melvin could if he wanted to.
if he wanted to, yeah, no, that's part of it.
If he
There,
doesn't get in basketball, he doesn't really get tired. Just knowing how he, I mean, play. It's just you would have to really push on. But I think he could definitely do an 8.
yeah, well, and his nephew Skylar, I don't know if you know Skylar. He's the other guy who does the high jump.
Yeah, he was. Skylar was pretty. He was. Yeah, he was new. A couple. Yeah, he was. He did a really good job his first time. First
Yeah.
couple times.
Yeah, no, but he's got the build, and he certainly has the physical capability to do it, a 4 or an 8. It's just the motivation that's behind it. It's to get him to get up and heck, sometimes just do a long jump. Some is now part of that challenge is his mother coaches is Kim, coaches the high jump and the long jump, and so
Yeah, I know Kim.
it may well be doing it for mom as opposed to just doing it. So, but yeah, but he could. Yes, and there's a number of other folks who could do it, but yeah. So anyway, Ryan, what I wanted to check with you on, in terms of any follow up with these folks, I'm going to pull their rosters. It may be that we send one blanket thing out, but then I send individually their statuses. I mean, if they're taking the time to come to here, they should be made aware. And same thing I'll do for Saturday or for Sunday. Folks are there on Sunday as well, of what they've got. Are they missing anything? The big one on here was about, I don't know. I don't know that all of the new folks have done coaching Special Olympics athletes. So wanting to be sure that they're aware of that. So that, checking with them individually on that would be, or providing that information to them. So
Like I have the list of names. I have no problem after sending out the group on with the 3 links we talked about, following up, sending an email to each person. I'll include you on it in case you want to see them.
yeah, well, just if you want to include me just on one, that's fine. So also with the send the slides to them definitely.
Yep.
But do you know how to save a PowerPoint? Not PowerPoint. I know you know how to save a PowerPoint as a PDF. But do you know how to save a PDF as a compressed version? Okay. And because I'm not sure how big the file's going to be when you make it. The PowerPoint's 9 megs, which is pretty big for some email systems. So when you save it as save it as a PDF.
Okay.
Then within Acrobat, use the Save As option, and there should be a little checkbox. It might not be a checkbox. It may be something else, depending upon what version you're using, that says Save as a compressed file. And you just save it with the same name. You're going to save right over top of it, but it can shrink it down to 1/10 the size. The thing that bumps it up is all the pictures and diagrams and such, but the compressed file should crunch that down to make it much more manageable for sending it. I mean, we can send stuff that's 9 megs, but a lot of email systems have some challenge with that.
Okay.
Well, the
PDF. Go ahead, Don.
Well, the PDF itself should compress it a little bit, because
Right.
if you have any embedded videos and stuff, that's not going to be included. So that will help it a little bit. Yeah, and
Yeah.
doing that compressed should save you. Yeah, it should be able be very manageable.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's if you wanted. So if you want to send it individually, so I want to be sure each person knows their. And I might have a sample. somewhere, but whether they've taken, their expiration for volunteer, for protected behaviors, for concussion, and for CDW.
Okay.
And then also what their, if they need to take coaching Special Olympics athletes. Because if they've, even if they took it 5 years ago, this will renew it for them, so they don't have to. It's just that they've never taken it. So if you could just tell them specifically, maybe even have you. So if you're using a standard, like a template, and then you're just copying it and sending it on, just maybe have a statement. Have you completed coaching Special Olympics athletes? And yes or no, and then have a link to the education page where there's links to take it.
Okay.
Or if you want to send me a sample.
Yeah, let's do that first.
Yeah, let's do that, and then I'll tweak it, whatever. I will look to see. I know I've sent these out for something recently, and I don't remember what it was.
Mike, can you set up the sample one? I can take it from there.
Yeah. That's fine.
I'd appreciate that. All right.
Sure. Okay. Well, and I'm so seeing Bob, was that a good thing or a scary thing?
No, it was great. Like,
okay. I don't mean this is with your, if he had you in detention all the time, that could just be bringing horrible memories. So.
I was a big gum chewer, so that's what kind of came with it. But no, he had so much patience. I don't remember a thing about math or anything, but he was someone that had more patience than most people should have in some classroom moments. So he's a good man.
Good. I didn't realize you went to good counsel. I would have made some mention of that earlier to you. Bob's also more so with distance running than with summer games track. He's been very involved. In fact, he's been a starter for us several times as a backup.
I've heard his name all over. I just
for the distance running. Yeah.
Very neat.
So
the best distance runners we have are the kids from Howard County, and
the Whirlies and Julian Thon and all those guys. Yeah.
And Washington has a couple. John does a decent job. I mean, they don't have as many athletes in general, but they do have usually a couple of distance runners.
Yeah, they do. Candy does, Lee does, but yeah, they usually they do have several others that are. I went up for one of their events. I think it was fall of 19, so just not immediately before COVID hit, but shortly before COVID hit, and they had a really good turnout up there for their event. So
yeah, and they usually get a handful of cross country runners. Yeah,
right. Well, I'm sorry, I'm actually saying that was their distance rate. They do much more distance running in the fall than at summer games, but yeah, they because they'll do the much longer races too for that. So
yeah, they do. Yeah, they do a decent job. We haven't had the luck of getting a lot of people running the longer distances, but but I mean, we'd be willing to offer it. It's just getting people interested, especially fall with all the other sports going on. It's kind of people have to choose.
Right. Yeah. So okay. Well, cool. So Ryan, I probably won't get that draft to you until the morning.
Okay.
But we're good to go. And when do you have your shot tomorrow? Is that morning or afternoon?
Saturday.
Oh, it's Saturday. Oh,
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm meeting with Rennie to do some video recording in Montgomery County, and then getting the shot, and be ready for CSOA.
So actually, you live in Mount Airy, right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm getting the FCA.
I thought good counsel was closer to DC, or is it in northern Montgomery County?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It was a hike, but it was a good school.
Oh yeah, no, definitely, yeah. So cool.
All right, Mike. One final question, Don. I think I'm gonna ask you to leave or remove you. It's not a
okay. I can head out.
But thank you for being on tonight. Don talked for probably half the time in our group and helped the discussion a lot. So
That's fine.
I appreciate it.
No problem. See you guys.
See ya.
Thanks, Don.
See ya.
Just the one question. Shirley was in our group, and I tried to ask her to stay on at the end before we left. She had her camera off the whole time, which is fine, but didn't say anything. I was just going to ask her if she happened to stay on, say one thing that she learned for the training. Do you want me to email her? Just, it's fine.
Yeah, that's what, yeah, you can ask that. Well, did you say in anything that's gone out to them,
No.
anything about, and that's why I was hesitant. So I know like for the cheerleading session, which was a couple weeks ago, they had told them ahead of time that you have to ask a question or whatever. And so they could hold them to it. And actually that, hindsight being 2020, that did, once they got rolling on the question part, I mean, they had a long, just mostly Anna or Anger talking to him for almost an hour and a half. But then when they got to that point and they gave the reminder of that remember you need to ask a question, things started popping back and forth.
Okay, I'll do that for Bocce then.
Yeah. Now that said, I think you can do it even for new coaches. That was mostly returning coaches or experienced coaches there. Yeah. I'm going to reach out to Signer as well. He was to find out whether this format, I know this format worked. I'm certain it worked for the experienced coaches. They are, from an adult learning standpoint, them talking to each other is much better than us trying to dictate something to them, or even having Bob dictate something to him, or Bill Wood or whatever.
Right.
But I wasn't sure whether it was helpful. I think it was, but whether it was helpful having the experienced coaches debrief and share with them what they talked about, if that helped, or if that was just, I don't know, whether either over their head or they didn't see any value in it. So it was worth a try.
Yeah. My group was happy. It was good. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe they didn't like the portion where we spent 45 minutes going through it, and then they had to repeat the same thing, which felt like a waste of time probably, but they're helping each other when they do that. And a lot of the stuff that was shared, other coaches weren't doing it. So it was good. I liked it.
Good. Okay. Well, can always tweak and play around with stuff here. So,
Thank
okay.
you very much, Mike.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.